welcome to this latest edition of my fan questions series. And today I want to say a big thank you to Edith and the lovely Lucy the dog for this excellent question.
Hi Claire, this is like take 1000. My name is Edith. I comment on your channel as EM. This is Lucy, and we would like to know, is when Anne Boleyn was arrested, was she still treated as a queen? Did she still have all the privileges of a queen? Because I saw in the series The Tudors that she was still being treated as a queen. She was still being bowed to and still had her ladies in waiting, even when she was being taken to the Tower. Is that fact or fiction? Say thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
Now, the Tudors series may have contained many inaccuracies, but yes, Anne Boleyn was treated according to her status as queen during her imprisonment in the Tower of London. After Anne's arrest on the 2nd of May 1536 at Greenwich Palace, she was escorted by barge to the Tower of London along the River Thames, entering the Tower through the Court Gate of the Byward Tower and not by Traitor's Gate. Anne assumed that she'd be taken to a dungeon, but Sir William Kingston, Constable of the Tower of London, informed her that she was to go into the lodging you lay in at your coronation. The lodging in question was the Queen's apartments of the Tower's Royal Palace, which were renovated for Anne's coronation in 1533. Henry VIII spent the equivalent of £1 million on the project, luxury apartments for the Queen with a gallery and private gardens. Unfortunately, these no longer exist, as they'd fallen into disrepair by the end of the 16th century, and the Royal Palace complex had been demolished by the end of the 18th century, including the King's Hall, the Great Hall where Anne and her brother were tried in May 1536. So Anne was given lavish apartments, and ladies were also appointed to serve her during her imprisonment. These, however, were not her usual ladies in waiting, and Anne complained about them, saying to Sir William Kingston, "I think much unkindness in the king to put such about me as I never loved." 4 ladies are mentioned in Kingston's dispatches. A Mrs. Stoner, who was Margaret or Anne Folliot, wife of Sir Walter Stoner, the King's Sergeant-at-Arms. Elizabeth Wood, Lady Boleyn, who was Anne's aunt by marriage. She was married to Thomas Boleyn's younger brother, Sir James Boleyn of Blickling Hall. Although Sir James Boleyn had served Anne as her chancellor, he and his wife were said to be supporters of the Lady Mary, Henry VIII's eldest daughter. When Anne complained about Lady Boleyn and mistress cousins having been appointed to serve her in the Tower, Lady Boleyn answered her back, saying, "Such desire as you have had to such tales has brought you to this." So not very sympathetic. Then we have Mrs. Margaret Coffin, or Margaret Dimmock, who's also referred to as Mistress or Mrs. Cousins. She was the wife of William Coffin, the Queen's Master of the Horse, and a gentleman of the Privy Chamber. The Coffins were related by marriage to the Boleyns, but Mrs. Coffin had been appointed to spy on Anne in the Tower. She was the lady chosen along with Lady Boleyn to sleep on the Queen's pallet. That is to say, to sleep on a pallet bed in the same room as Anne. Another lady who was appointed, and who was actually the lady in charge of the others, was the Constable of the Tower's wife, Mary Scroop, Lady Kingston, who'd served Catherine of Aragon and who was close to the Lady Mary. Now, it's possible that another of Anne's aunts, Lady Anne Shelton, Thomas Boleyn's sister, served her too. Along with her husband, Sir John Shelton, she'd been in charge of the joint household of the King's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, and had been ordered to treat Mary badly. However, although, as historian Natalie Gruniger points out, a Mrs. Shelton or Skelton is mentioned in Sir William Kingston's dispatches, it's only really with regards to Francis Weston flirting with that Mistress Skelton, described as Anne's kinswoman, who was actually Madge Shelton, Lady Shelton's daughter. Lady Shelton is not actually mentioned by Kingston as serving Anne in the Tower. Only the other four ladies are mentioned in his dispatches. We know that for her trial, Anne was accompanied by her other aunt, Lady Boleyn, and Lady Kingston. All of these ladies were to act as spies. They weren't supposed to engage the Queen in conversation without Lady Kingston being present. And then Lady Kingston had to report everything the Queen said back to her husband, the Constable, so that he could include it in his daily dispatches to Thomas Cromwell, which he did. However, Kingston noted in a letter to Cromwell that it was impossible for Mistress Cousins and Lady Boleyn to avoid talking to Anne because they slept on a pallet by the Queen's bed, and his wife didn't sleep in the same chamber. Anne dined with the Constable each evening, and Kingston would report back to Cromwell anything she said. For example, when, after Archbishop Cranmer's visit on the 16th of May, she spoke to Kingston of being in hope of life and the possibility of her going to a nunnery. We don't know where that idea came from, whether she was offered some kind of deal in return for her agreement to the annulment of her marriage. Obviously, if she was offered a deal, Cromwell and the king went back on it. So, Anne was in lavish royal apartments with ladies in waiting, but she was still a prisoner. She was with unsympathetic ladies, she didn't know what was going on, and she was denied the sacrament and visits from her almoner until near the end. Fortunately, though, there is no mention in Kingston's dispatches of Anne being forced to watch the executions of her brother and the other four men. Anne would not have been able to see the scaffold on Tower Hill from the royal apartments, and there's no mention of her being moved or of her witnessing the executions, as Thomas Wyatt appears to have done from the bell tower. Phew. But who attended Anne at her execution on the 19th of May 1536? Well, we actually don't know. The ladies who accompanied her to the scaffold, who helped her remove her outer clothing and who dealt with her remains afterwards, are not named or described. It would make sense for them to be the same four ladies who attended her during her imprisonment, as they were there with her. The primary sources describe them as being distressed. Lancelot de Carle, secretary to the French ambassador, described them as not being able to hold back their tears on the scaffold, and after Anne's execution, being nearly dead themselves from languor and extreme weakness, and not wanting their mistress's remains to be handled by cold-blooded men. This doesn't mean that they were not those four unsympathetic ladies who'd attended the Queen in the Tower. Those four ladies, although initially unsympathetic, had been with the Queen for over 2 weeks in the Tower, and two of them had even slept with her. They'd been with her when she rambled and tried to understand what was going on. They were with her when she used her black humour to joke about what was coming. They would have seen her at her lowest points, and they may well have witnessed her swearing her innocence on the sacrament. Then, in her final hours, she surely would have impressed them and moved them with her courage and dignity. It would be natural for them to be distressed that day. I mean, I cry reading books and watching movies when characters get killed and I don't even know them. So surely they would have been moved to tears however they'd felt about Anne before. And although there is the tradition that Anne gave her ladies gifts like miniature prayer books on the scaffold, which would point to those ladies being close friends of hers, this actually is not backed up by any of the primary source accounts of her execution. Edith, I do hope that I've answered your question and that Lucy enjoyed my video. Thanks for an excellent question. I will see you very soon. Please do subscribe to the channel by clicking round about there so you don't miss any videos, and you can hit the bell to be notified as well. Please do consider giving me a like and leaving a comment. Take care. Bye bye.